Lakeshore always puts me in a really cool hotel, nice hotel. I got a king-size bed. I don't know any kings, but if one came over, I guess he would be comfortable. Oh, you're a king, you say? Well, you won't believe what I have in store for you. It's to your exact specifications. When I was a boy, I laid in my twin-size bed, wondering where my brother was.
Good morning. It's Wednesday, Apollo Wednesday, February the 25th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have Varney and Company, motivation, meditation, and Apollo. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. The end of Maria and the beginning of Stu.
That stock, it could set the tone for the morning. President's State of the Union address last night. I was honored to be there within the hall and watched it from inside. I heard some of the heckling from the Democrats. I was honored to be in the speaker's box and a guest of Nicole Malliotakis, Congresswoman from Staten Island. The history in that building is incredible. Ran into some friends like Rachel Campos Duffy and Secretary Sean Duffy, as well as Representative Pfluger there with us. Have a great day, everybody. See you again tomorrow. Varney and Company picks it up. Stu, take it away.
Hey, good morning, Maria. Good morning, everyone. The longest State of the Union ever, 1 hour and 48 minutes. Political theater at the highest level. The president played the Democrats. He exposed their weakness on key issues like illegal migrants, voter ID, and men playing in girls' sports. They heckled him. He didn't lose his temper. He didn't go off message. And that message was, America is respected again. The state of our union is strong. At least 79 Democrat legislators did not show up. Only 4 of the 9 Supreme Court justices were there. But the gold medal hockey team made a dramatic entrance. That was the patriotic event of the night. And the president, he owned it. It's hard to see any direct impact on stocks this morning. Solid gains Tuesday, modest gains again today. The Dow up about 180, S&P up 20, Nasdaq up 124. All green. Wall Street's main event today is the release of Nvidia's latest earnings report. It comes after the bell. How much did they make and how much do they expect to make in the future? As of now, Nvidia stock is solid. It's up about 1%, almost 1%, at 194. As Maria's just said, it sets the tone for the day, certainly the morning. Bitcoin, still stuck in the doldrums. It's at 66.2 right now. Gold above $5,200 an ounce, 52.04. The 10-year Treasury yields just over 4%, 4.05. The 2-year Treasury, that yields under 3.5 at 3.48. Oil, $66 a barrel. The president says he favors diplomacy in his dispute with Iran. That would tend to put the price of oil right in the mid-60s there. But you better take a look at gas. It keeps getting closer to an average of $3 a gallon. Right now we're at $2.97. On the show today, New York City in deep trouble. Police officers attacked with chunks of ice and rocks. 2 taken to the hospital. The mayor dismisses the violence. He says it was just kids at a snowball fight. Big mistake. The police were violently attacked, and the mayor doesn't have their back. 2 months into his term, the socialist is not doing well. Wednesday, February the 25th, 2026, Varney and Company is about to begin.
And that was Maria and Stu, Nonprofit News Now. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, what the liberals are doing to us destroys them. When a liberal harms conservatives socially, politically, they're making a decision far more consequential than they realize. In the moment, they believe that they are securing dominance, control, the upper hand. They think they have won because conservatives flinched, stayed quiet, or tried to reason with them. However, what liberals are really doing is something much more self-destructive. They're sabotaging their own future. Liberals are sacrificing long-term trust and meaning for the sake of short-term power. That's a catastrophic trade. The liberals, at their core, live in the present moment, but not in the wise, mindful way we often associate with living in the now. The liberals' relationship to time is pathological. They're not guided by a coherent story of who they are and where they are going. Liberals are driven by impulse, by what they need to maintain their fragile egos right now. So, in a moment of threat, when liberal superiority is questioned, when their control is challenged, they lash out. They gaslight, they lie, they humiliate, they punish. But they don't stop to ask the most important question. What are we destroying in the process? The answer, more often than not, is everything that could have been good for them. You see, meaningful relationships, ones built on honesty, reciprocity, and vulnerability, are the scaffolding of a meaningful life. That's not sentimentality, that's psychological truth. When someone tells you the truth about yourself, even when it hurts, they offer you the chance to evolve. The liberals don't see this. The liberals see correction as a threat. The liberal sees care as control. The liberals see closeness as an opportunity for exploitation or as something to be distrusted. So instead of receiving the gift, the liberals reject it, or worse, they destroy the giver. Actions have consequences, and those consequences are not always loud. They don't always arrive immediately. Sometimes they unfold slowly and quietly. Years later, the liberals will wonder why no one trusts them, why relationships never last, why there's always some breakdown, some fracture, some drama, and the reason is simple. Liberals undermine the future with every manipulative act in the present. Every time that liberals choose to dominate instead of relate, they erode the very possibility of peace, stability, or legacy. There's a paradox in this. Liberals are obsessed with status, with legacy, with being remembered as great or admirable. When liberals chose cruelty over humility, deceit over honesty, they became the architects of their own irrelevance. The liberals burn the bridge while standing on it. They mistake the fire for power. Let's not misunderstand this. When a liberal loses someone patient, self-aware, willing to grow, they're not just losing a partner, a friend, a confidant. They're losing a mirror, a reflection for them of what was still possible if only they had chosen accountability over arrogance. The liberal rarely sees this until it's too late. By the time the silence becomes deafening, by the time the circle shrinks and the admiration dries up, the damage is already done. What the liberals did to you wasn't just cruel, it was foolish, because conservatives were part of their opportunity for transformation, and by trying to control conservatives, they destroyed the very conditions that could have led to their growth. The liberals slammed the door on the one opportunity to create a better future, and in so doing, they locked themselves out. The tragedy of the liberals is not just that they hurt others, it's that they destroy themselves while doing it. They don't realize the cost until they are alone. Liberal power is an illusion. It's loud, it's aggressive, it's confident, but it's hollow. When time begins to chip away at the illusion, what's left is regret. Not the kind that humbles, but the kind that haunts. So in retrospect, one might ask, why did they do this? Remember this. They didn't just betray conservatives, they betrayed their own future. In choosing the automatic gratification of control, they forfeited the long-term gift of connection. When a liberal devalues a conservative to inflate himself, they believe that they are winning. They believe that they are rising higher by pushing conservatives lower. That maneuver, while temporarily satisfying to their ego, is not without cost. In fact, it is one of the most self-destructive choices they can make. What the liberals sacrifice in that moment is something far more profound than they understand. The possibility of authentic connection. The very thing that gives human life its meaning. The liberals are constantly engaged in a continual and desperate process of self-construction, and they're trying to build an identity out of image, admiration, and dominance. These, however, are brittle materials. They lack substance. They lack soul. So, in the liberals' inner emptiness, they can constantly seek external validation to hold themselves together. Anyone who offers truth becomes both a necessity and a threat. That's where the devaluation begins. The moment that the conservative stops mirroring back what it is that the liberals want to see, they must diminish the conservative. Why? Because conservative authenticity reveals liberal inauthenticity. Conservative strength unsettles liberals' fragility. Conservative boundaries threaten their control. So rather than risk the discomfort of self-examination, they choose projection. They twist the conservative's words, they mock the conservative's pain, they question the conservative's worth, all to keep their internal scaffolding from collapsing. Here's the irony. In doing so, they destroy the one thing that might have saved them, genuine connection. Intimacy that is rooted in truth, a bond that could have moved them from the shallows of performance into the depths of self-awareness. When liberals devalue conservatives, they're not just diminishing conservatives, they're retreating from reality itself. A life divorced from reality becomes filled with paranoia, instability, and loneliness. Liberals often think they are special because they don't need others. They imagine themselves as lone wolves or superior beings beyond the common frailties of vulnerability and interdependence. This, however, is a delusion. Back in a minute. Thank you. So about the State of the Union speech, I didn't watch it because I knew that I'm going to have to watch it again and again and again for the rest of the week, because news agencies, Fox and et al., are going to be playing clips from it for the rest of the week, and I'm going to hear it on the radio, see it on TV, hear it on the radio. I'm going to see it and hear it on social media, so why do I want to do it 6, 7, 8 times? I may as well skip the original and then just watch the clips. Anyhow, President Trump's speech has been trivialized by liberals, okay? And liberals did it with one sentence, and that is the longest speech in history, in State of the Union history. The people that are supposed to be providing a counterbalance to the liberal message or messages are failing because they take that sentence and they repeat it. I don't know how many times I've heard that. That was the first thing I heard last night, when I checked news and other sources. First thing out of their mouth is the longest speech in State of the Union history, trivializing everything that he said. And the people on Fox, I just heard Maria Bartiromo do it, describe the speech as the longest speech in State of the Union history, trivializing President Trump's message. And then we wonder why it is we struggle to win in this country. Gee, go figure. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, motivation.
Are you going to say you want to do something, do it for 2 weeks and then quit? Like you did last year, like you did the year before last? You say you want to lose weight, get in shape, get your business off the ground, and then turn around and party, drink alcohol, eat like crap, and continue to live below who you were created to be. How long is it going to take to make the decision, to make the shift, and show some courage? It is time to go from mediocre to meteoric. It is time to go from being counted out to being counted on.
I've never met anybody who became incredibly successful in any area of their life until they had suffered and sweated and sacrificed and kept their focus and fought through tears and trials and tests. And if you have a dream and you fully commit to it sooner or later, if you do not surrender, if you do not quit, it will happen.
When I wake up in the morning, I don't think, am I motivated to go do what I'm supposed to do? No, I don't think about it for 1 millisecond. When the alarm clock goes off, I have no thought about whether this is easy, whether this is hard, whether I want to do it, whether I don't want to do it. None of that matters. It's an emotionless, thoughtless discipline. When the alarm clock goes off, you get up, you get out of bed, and you go do what you're supposed to do. I don't care how it feels. I don't care if it's easy or hard. It doesn't even matter to me. It's just a reaction. It's a discipline, and it's life. and that's the way I choose to live my life.
Too tired, too hungry, too sore, too hot, too cold, too whatever. People ask me what I do when I get those little feelings running around. Well, let me tell you what I don't do. I don't tell everybody. As a matter of fact, I don't even let those words run around inside my own brain housing group. I keep it secure, lock it down.
To me, this is an everyday gig. Every day is a Monday, an opportunity to come out of the gate like a man possessed and attack the day without mercy. Today, I'm taking scalps. I'm putting the pressure on. I'm the aggressor. I'm on the attack.
It's a lifestyle. Instead of hitting that snooze button in the morning and not making your bed, you don't hit the snooze button. You get up. You don't want to go run. You go run. You don't want to go swim. You go swim. You don't want to make your bed. You make your bed. You don't want to clean your house. You clean your house. You don't want to study. You go and study. It's going to suck. It's not going to be fun. Do something that sucks every single day of your life. That's how you grow.
The only thing you do for success is sweat, is blood, it's tears. You think you're going to get 50%? You think you're going to get 70%? You think you're going to get 80? There is no discount. You can't get 50% off. There are no shortcuts to success. Stop thinking they are. And stop wanting people to put you somewhere that you didn't earn. The real beast is when their legs give out. The real beast when they tired. The real beast find a way to pull something out when nobody else ain't got nothing. When you really want it, you no longer hit the snooze button. You no longer lose focus when you're studying. You no longer take shortcuts. You are willing to do whatever it takes. And that means getting up early, going to bed late. That means you don't go to sleep when you're tired. You go when you're done.
And that was motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little meditation. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. So I'm listening to a segment about Comrade Zohran, the mayor of New York City, and about his policies vis-a-vis identification. And it had occurred to me that the one thing that the journalists or supposed journalists are not picking up on is that Comrade Zohran is an inherent contradiction. He claims to be both a communist and a Muslim, and that's impossible. He cannot be both. He has to pick and choose. He is either a communist or he is a Muslim. Communists are atheists. Muslims believe in Allah. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the epilogue to Apollo.
Epilogue. 20 years after the first landing. I will admit that I walk out every now and then in the morning to get the paper when the moon happens to be up and say, "By God, we were there." Rod Lowe. Looking back 20 years after the first landing, many of the people of Apollo agree with John Aaron's sentiment. It was a little like gulping good wine. Few had the time to step outside of events and assess what was going on until later. It was funny, Rod Rose reminisces. Just a little while ago, when I retired, people asked me to look back and all that. And it was not until then that it came home to me. My God, I've been involved in the first quarter of a century of manned spaceflight. Another veteran notes that when his children come to visit and look through his memorabilia, they ask him why he doesn't have autographs of the astronauts and presidents and celebrities who came to watch him at work. You were right there, they say. But he was always so busy, he tells them, he just didn't pay any attention. We knew we were doing something, but nobody really felt the impact of what was really going on. The job was too consuming for that, almost a crusade, said another veteran. Nothing like any other job he ever had. Some are unhappy that the rest of the country has never truly comprehended the historic nature of our first journey to another world. Most people think of Apollo as just another episode in the tumultuous 60s, secondary to the Vietnam War and America's social upheaval, not as something that will still figure large in the history books when Vietnam and John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson are consigned to footnotes. But the failure to understand goes beyond that, argues Rocco Petrone. We've had a lot of reporting of how big the rocket is, how much noise it makes, pictures of guys on the moon. But what was the real meaning of Apollo? What did it symbolize? What were we after? For a few short years, Apollo was almost like a renaissance, Petrone thinks. But nobody wants to confront that kind of possibility now. To do so would make the nation recognize how much it abandoned so casually. The dark side of the experience was the sacrifices it required of the Apollo families. Rod Rose again. If I had to tip my hat to the unspoken heroes of the Apollo program, it would be to the wives and families of the engineers. The wives were widows. They had none of the glory, none of the kudos. They were the ones left behind with the kids, the bills. Many of the men of Apollo look back at their youthful selves and are appalled at what they took for granted. The same phrases keep recurring. My wife was a saint, or I don't know why my wife didn't leave me, or I didn't see my kids grow up. Boy, if I hadn't had the kind of wife I had, said tough old Tom O'Malley, and some of the rest of us who were in the same boat didn't have the wives they had, Apollo would have never come off. In many cases, families didn't survive the stress. During the mid-1960s, the towns around KSC had the highest divorce rate in the country. At the program's height, one Cape engineer counted up the divorces among just the people he knew, 78 of them in the preceding 6 months. Houston wasn't far behind. Gran Paulus pulls out a picture of a party at his house after Apollo 8 landed. Within a week of the party, he says, 4 of the couples there had revealed they were getting divorced. And yet in 1989, it is striking how many of the people who made the biggest contributions to the program are still married to the same person who, a quarter century ago, came with them to the wilds of Merritt Island or Clear Lake. The consensus is that this is no coincidence. under the heat of Apollo, your marriage either melted or annealed. The same may have been true of individuals. Apollo no doubt took its share of miscreants and time servers and self-aggrandizers, but the program had a way of getting rid of them through self-selection. Among the people who remained, Apollo seems to have counted an extraordinarily high proportion of gentlemen. Gentlemen in the uncomplicated sense of being straight shooters and hard workers and not show-offs. Perhaps this can be explained by the nature of the challenge they were ready to take on and by the unworldly rewards with which they had to satisfy themselves. For whatever reasons, the remark Joe Shea made about Houston when he arrived, that he'd never seen a place like it where no one was jockeying for position, everyone was just trying to do his best, seems to summarize the program's character in the other centers as well. Moreover, the people of Apollo seem to have retained those qualities since. Bill Tyndall's insistence that he didn't do anything himself is an only slightly exaggerated version of the generosity of spirit that is common among the Apollo veterans. Not everyone was a hero, and most certainly not everyone was a saint. But, 20 years after the first landing, the people of Apollo have, as a group, aged remarkably well. There is nostalgia among them, but no post-Apollo stress syndrome. Inevitably, some have departed. Werner von Braun died in 1977, Kurt Diebes in 1983, and George Lowe in 1984. Other, less famous characters in the story are also gone. Dan Clute died of a heart attack a few months after the combustion instability problem on the F-1 engine was resolved, worn out, many of his friends believe, by the unremitting strain of that effort. NASA later named a lunar crater in his honor. Others who are not here to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the first landing include Tequan Roberts, the first Fido, John Disher, who was part of the first planning for a lunar landing, and George Bliss of the ECOM backroom during Apollo 13. But many of the famous names of Apollo, famous within NASA anyway, are very much alive. James Webb lives in retirement in Washington, D.C. He still likes to talk and still does so with all the energy and political insight that he applied to the administration of NASA. Robert Gilruth lives near where it all began, in a little town on the water 45 miles north of Langley, with a hydrofoil sailboat of his own design tied to the dock. Abe Silverstein divides his time between Cleveland, close to Lewis Research Center, which he directed after leaving NASA headquarters, and his retirement home in Florida. Sam Phillips retired to the seaside south of Los Angeles. His successor, Rocco Petrone, is only a few miles away, newly retired from Rockwell. George Miller is up the coast in Santa Barbara. Chris Kraft is still in Houston. Eberhard Reese still in Huntsville. Walt Williams lives in Tarzana, California, but it is easier to locate him in Washington, the Cape, Huntsville, or Houston. He still consults for NASA. John Hubolt is in Williamsburg and still keeps an office at Langley, as does the mentor to so many in the Space Task Group, William Hewitt Phillips. Robert Siemens has for many years been on the faculty of MIT. Jerome Weisner, with whom he tangled in the early days of the Kennedy administration, is president emeritus of MIT, still working in his office in the Jerome B. Weisner building. In 1989, they got a new colleague, Joe Shea, who is taking some time off from his senior vice presidency at Raytheon to teach a course there. For the many figures in Apollo who were young men when the program finished, the 20th anniversary finds them still in the middle of their careers. It is bemusing to walk away from a conversation with Glynn Lunny about the dawn of manned spaceflight and realize that, to his colleagues at Rockwell, Glynn Lunny is, as he was in Chris Kraft's fledgling flight operations group, a guy on the way up. Some of the kids of Apollo are running the manned space program. The center director at MSC, now the Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center, JSC, is Aaron Cohen. One of his predecessors was Jerry Griffin. John Aaron runs JSC's space station planning. Go to the JSC cafeteria and, if you know where to look, you are likely to see Steve Bales, Chuck Dietrich, Bob Holcan, Ed Pavelka, Cy Liebergott, Rod Lowe, Jay Green, Jack Garman, and Emil Schieser. All still work on the JSC campus, either for NASA or for NASA contractors. Gene Kranz is still at JSC directing the Mission Operations Division. The main difference between crayons now and the crayons of 20 years ago is the advent of the automobile tape deck. He can play his Sousa marches on the way to work. He is too senior to be a flight director anymore, but if you're trying to find him when a shuttle is flying, you might want to look first in the Moker. Though they don't work at JSC anymore, many others remain in the Houston area. Scott Simpkinson and his co-conspirator in shaving down the Big Joe heat shield, Jack Kinsler, live within a few miles of each other. Jerry Griffin, Jerry Bostic, Dick Coos, Rod Rose, Cliff Charlesworth, John Llewellyn, and Ed Fendel live in and around the Clear Lake housing developments that were so raw and new in 1962, and now are green, shady, and established. Max Fagé and Cadwell Johnson are in Houston too, past retirement age, but hardly retired. They still work together in a private company that Fagé founded, Space Industries Incorporated, collaborating now into their 5th decade. They have most recently designed a man-tended space station that many NASA engineers will say, off the record, is a masterpiece of economy and elegance, and may yet be the first space station deployed. Johnson still builds model airplanes in his spare time. In Huntsville, Karl Heimberg, who ran von Braun's testing lab, is only one of the many Germans, and now Alabamians, who remain near Marshall in their retirement. Bob Wolf, who waited out the crippled S-2 stage on Apollo 6, is still at Marshall. Jerry Thompson heads the Advanced Propulsion Systems office there. Thompson's Rocketdyne colleague during the struggle with combustion instability, Paul Kastenholz, has retired from the rocket business to live in Colorado Springs. One prominent Marshall veteran is not in Huntsville. In 1983, the Justice Department, acting on information that had been in the U.S. government's hands for almost 40 years, told Arthur Rudolph, program manager of the Saturn V, that he must surrender his U.S. citizenship and leave the country, or face charges that he had been involved in the forced labor camp at Nordhausen, where the V-2 was manufactured. Rudolph, then 76, denied the charges, but returned to Germany. His colleagues during Apollo continue to hold him in high esteem, saddened and sometimes angered by this denouement of his career at Marshall. At the Cape, those who have retired have almost all stayed nearby. Merritt Preston, Tom O'Malley, Ed Fannin, Grady Korn, Sam Bedingfield, Walt Caprian, and Don Buchanan may be found scattered in Titusville, Melbourne, and Cocoa Beach. Joe Bobick tried to retire, but after the Challenger accident, he was lured back to work for Lockheed, overseeing quality assurance for the shuttle's orbiter. Ike Ridgel has been no more successful in pulling himself away from rockets. He is an executive with United States Boosters Incorporated, with an office a half-dozen miles from Pad 39. Don Arabian may be found just south of KSC, still insisting he has no sentiment about spaceflight, but nonetheless living in Cape Canaveral. Finally free to do everything himself, he lives in a home that looks like a showcase for every kind of craftsmanship, which he built by himself from a concrete shell. Beside the house, a 32-foot ocean-going sailboat is nearing completion, also entirely his own work. Arabian has never sailed, but he intends to take it around the world. Alone, of course. He still has Bill Tyndall's bandsaw that he borrowed 15 years ago, but he promises to return it when he is finished. Tyndall himself is in Washington, D.C., where he is now as enthusiastic about the mysteries of civilian air traffic control as he used to be about lunar flight. The X-ray experimenters Izzy Adler and Jack Tromka are also near Washington. Adler continues to teach physics at the University of Maryland, and Tromka continues to work at the Goddard Space Flight Center on gamma-ray studies, using high-altitude balloons these days instead of lunar spacecraft. Tromka also teaches an occasional evening course on astrophysics for laymen at the Smithsonian Institution. One evening after class in the fall of 1983, he captivated 2 of his students with stories about Apollo, about what it was like to be in the control center, and especially about the strange and wonderful people who ran the place. Someone, he observed upon parting, really ought to write a book about them.
And that was the epilogue of Apollo by Charles Murray and Catherine Bly Cox. And next week, Dr. Feynman. He's a nuclear, well, not necessarily nuclear, but a physicist. Actually, I think he's physicist that's going to talk to us about space travel. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you're not neutral and that the government has no rights.